The wind beat against the windows of the old house, as if trying to wrench time itself from its foundations, time that flowed sluggishly within those walls. Alvin didn't close the shutters. He allowed the autumn chill to fill the rooms, dispelling the stagnant air that smelled of old books, dust, and unshared solitude. Halloween, for the world, a night of witches, laughter, and costumes. For him, just another evening in a long chain of identical evenings stretching over 30 long years. He sat in his armchair by the fireplace, where the last embers barely glowed, and looked at the photograph in an ancient silver frame. Kathleen, her hair, bright red like an autumn maple, fell in long curls over her shoulder. Her eyes, green like spring grass, were laughing at him. He ran his finger over the cold glass, feeling the phantom warm touch of her hand. 30 years. 30 years ago, she had gone to the pharmacy for medicine for his sudden migraine and never returned. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing ring tore through the dead silence. Alvin jumped in his chair. His heart, accustomed to the monotonous rhythm of solitude, pounded so hard it took his breath away. The telephone, the old, black rotary dial apparatus standing on the hallway console. It hadn't rung in years. Alvin kept it only as a relic, as part of the interior frozen in the past. The wire had been cut long ago when he switched to a cell phone. The ringing continued, half muffled, half distinct. It sounded not so much in his ears as inside his skull. Alvin slowly stood up, feeling his joints creak with tension. He walked out into the corridor. The apparatus stood in its place, black and silent. But the ringing didn't stop. It seemed to come from the very air, from the depths of the house. Alvin timidly reached out. His fingers touched the cold plastic receiver. The ringing stopped. The silence that fell was louder than any sound. He was about to hang up when he suddenly heard a faint rustle from the earpiece, as if someone on the other end was touching the membrane. And then, a voice. Quiet, distant, but so familiar it struck Alvin like a bolt of lightning. Alvin, is that you? The world darkened. The floor beneath his feet ceased to exist. This wasn't an auditory hallucination. It was her, Kathleen, her voice with that same light, melodic lisp that always appeared when she was nervous. The voice he had only heard in his dreams for 3 decades. Kathleen? He exhaled, his own voice seeming raspy and foreign. How is this possible? A light, nervous laugh came from the other end. So alive, so real. I don't know. I don't understand. I just called. I felt like you needed me. Is your head hurting again? Alvin silently clutched his temple. Yes, a pain, real and tight, began to surge in waves, as if someone had tightened an iron band around his head. How could she know? It was the same day, the same hour. Yes, it hurts, he whispered, sinking onto the chair by the phone. My poor boy, her voice filled with tenderness. I'll be there soon. I'll bring you the pills. Wait for me, okay? I'll just pop into the pharmacy on Ross Street. Alvin's heart stopped. Ross Street, the pharmacy that no longer existed. It had been demolished 15 years ago. He felt a cold sweat break out on his back. No, he exclaimed, gripping the receiver. Kathleen, don't go. Don't go there. Alvin silently clutched his temple. Yes, a pain, real and tight, began to surge in waves, as if someone had tightened an iron band around his head. How could she know? It was the same day, the same hour. Yes, it hurts, he whispered, sinking onto the chair by the phone. Click. From the other end came the sound of the receiver being hung up. The line didn't disconnect. He could hear a distant hum, like street noise from 30 years ago, the buzzing of old cars, voices long since silenced. He sat there, pressing the receiver to his ear, from which only this ghostly noise remained. He waited, as he had waited that day. He knew she wouldn't return, but this time he could hear her footsteps fading into the past. Hours passed. The fire in the fireplace died out. Alvin didn't move. The noise in the receiver changed from time to time. Once, he thought he heard someone dialing a number on a rotary dial from the other side. Another time, a light whistle of wind, as if the receiver had been held near an open window. And then, close to midnight, the noise suddenly stopped. The silence became absolute once more. Alvin could barely breathe. He didn't know what to do. Hang up? But what if she called again? Suddenly, a sound came from the receiver. Not a voice. A sound that pierced his soul like an icy spear. The screech of brakes. Sharp, long, painful. Then, a dull, sickening thud. Metal against something soft. And another. And another. Alvin screamed. He dropped the receiver, and it swung on its cord, hitting the wall. But the sounds didn't stop. They echoed from the very air, from the dark corners of the corridor. Screech. Thud. Silence. And then, a light, barely audible moan. Her moan. Alvin. He fell to his knees, covering his ears with his hands. But the voice pierced him through. It hurts, so much. I promised, to return. Kathleen, he sobbed. I'm sorry I sent you. I'm sorry, not your fault. Her voice was weak, on the edge of audibility. My love, wait for me. I'm trying to find my way home. Then came the last, breathless whisper, wait. And everything fell silent, a true, unbreakable silence. The receiver lay on the floor, from which not even a dial tone came. Alvin sat on the floor, hugging himself, his whole body trembling. He had just heard his wife die. He had heard the accident that took her from him 30 years ago. The night passed. Alvin couldn't move. The sun rose, illuminating the dirty corridor. He stood up, barely moving his feet. Picked up the receiver. It was dead. He hung it up and went into the living room. The world outside the window seemed alien and distorted. He knew the truth. He had always suspected something terrible had happened. But knowing and hearing were two different chasms. For the next few days, he was in a deep stupor. He didn't eat, drink, or sleep. He just sat in his chair, looked at Kathleen's photograph, and listened. To the silence, to every creak of the house. He waited. He had given her his promise. He would wait. On Halloween night, exactly 1 week later, the phone rang again. Alvin rushed into the corridor as if electrocuted. He snatched the receiver. Kathleen? Silence. And then, a faint, distant crying. A child's cry. It was sad and lonely. Who is this? Alvin asked, feeling a new wave of horror. She can't talk right now, another voice sounded. Quiet, girlish. She's looking for the way. But she's lost. She's calling for you. Who are you? Alvin asked, feeling his blood run cold. We are those who wait, the voice replied. We listen to the calls. Sometimes, we pass them on. Alvin understood. He wasn't speaking to the living. And not even to Kathleen. He was speaking to other ghosts. To those who, like her, were stuck somewhere in between, in the liminal space between life and death, connected to this world through old wires, through the memory of houses, through unspoken words. Tell her I'm waiting. Always, he said, his voice catching. She knows, the girlish voice answered. She hears you, but you must listen too. Do you hear? Alvin fell silent, listening. Through the static, through the light crying, he heard something else. Familiar, a quiet, melodic lisp. He didn't hear it in the receiver. He heard it in the living room. He turned around. The room was empty, but the lisp was getting louder. It was coming from upstairs, from the stairs. She's here, isn't she? He whispered into the receiver. She was always here, the quiet speech echoed in response. You just never listened. The line went dead. Alvin hung up the receiver, not taking his eyes off the stairs. The lisp didn't fade. He went upstairs, each step requiring immense effort. He opened the door to the bedroom. The same as 30 years ago. The perfume on the dressing table, her favorite silk shawl thrown over the chair. The lisp was coming from the corner. From under the large mirror in the wooden frame. Alvin came closer. In the reflection, he saw only himself, an old, withered man with gray hair and sunken eyes. But the sound was coming from there. He reached out, touched the cold glass. The surface of the mirror rippled, like water. The reflection wavered, and for a moment, through his own face, he saw her. She was standing behind him, just as young and beautiful, with a sad smile. She reached out her hand to him. Kathleen, he exhaled. The smile disappeared. The mirror became ordinary again. But the lisp didn't disappear. It filled the room. It was everywhere. Alvin understood. He couldn't see her. Not like that. But he could hear, the house was not only his prison, it was hers too, and they were imprisoned together, separated by a thin veil of time and matter. From that day on, Alvin ceased to be a lone ghost. He became part of a duet. He began to talk to her aloud. He told her about his day, about what he saw outside the window, about old memories. And he listened. He listened to her lisp, which now constantly echoed through the house, a quiet, gentle soundtrack to his life after life. Sometimes, on particularly quiet nights, he thought he heard her laughter, or the light rustle of her dress in the corridor. The telephone never rang again. It had served its purpose. It had opened the doors that Alvin had shut in his own mind. Now they communicated directly, through the ether of the house's memory. Once, while sorting through things in the attic, Alvin found her old diary, which he hadn't dared to open all these years. On the first page was an inscription: "My home is not walls and a roof. It is the space where I hear his heartbeat, even when he is not near." He smiled. She had always known. She had always felt this connection. And now, when her physical form was gone, this connection became the only thing that mattered. They were together in this house. He, a living man, aging. She, an eternal echo. But they were together. The last entry in the diary was made on the day of her disappearance. "Going to get pills for Alvin. I so want to return quickly. He is waiting for me. I always feel it when he is waiting." Alvin closed the diary and pressed it to his chest. She knew. Years passed. Alvin grew even older. His hair fell out, his back bent. But he was no longer lonely. He lived in a house filled with her presence. He talked to her, listened to her, sometimes even danced with her ghostly shadow in the moonlight. And when his time came to an end, when he lay in his bed, feeling the last of his strength leave him, he was not afraid. He turned his head towards the door. It was open. She stood in the doorway. Not a shadow, not an echo, but real, living Kathleen, just as he remembered her last. Bright, radiant, she smiled and stretched out her hand to him. "I waited for you," she said. Her voice was pure and melodic, without static or pain. "I promised to return." Alvin smiled for the first time in many years. A real, happy smile. "I knew," he whispered. "I always waited." He stretched out his hand and placed his palm in hers. Her touch was warm. He closed his eyes. His heartbeat slowed and stopped. The last thing he heard was not the creak of the floor or the wind outside the window. It was her laughter, clear, joyful, filling the house, dispelling the loneliness and sorrow that had reigned there for decades. The locals said that ghosts inhabited the old house on the outskirts. That sometimes on Halloween night, you could hear the ring of an old telephone there. But those with the most sensitive hearing claimed that during the rain, you could hear not one thing. Not crying, not moaning, but a quiet, melodic lisp and an old, gentle laugh, sounding from the house in perfect harmony. And they said that if you walked past on such a night, you could feel not horror, but a strange, soothing peace. As if everything in the world had finally fallen into place.